So is Bitcoin's core mission under threat from the inside? That's what we're diving into today. We're going to explore a really strong argument that says Bitcoin's one true purpose is getting diluted, and we'll break down exactly why some people believe that. Everything we're about to discuss really hinges on this one simple idea. The core argument is that Bitcoin's base layer, its very foundation, was designed for one thing and one thing only: to be the most secure, unchangeable money the world has ever seen. Period. All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dig into that core purpose. Then, we'll look at a simple test to judge any project being built on Bitcoin. We'll even apply that test to 5 real-world examples, explore the supposed harms of getting it wrong, and finally, see what the proposed call to action is. Okay, let's start at square one. What is Bitcoin's base layer actually for? According to the perspective we're exploring, the answer is incredibly focused. And here is the absolute key distinction in this argument. Look, using your Bitcoin to buy a car, a house, another crypto asset, that's totally fine. But the network's foundational code, that shouldn't be altered to directly support other assets. The moment you do that, the argument goes, Bitcoin starts to lose its way. So to figure out if a project is respecting this one purpose, the source we're looking at proposes this really simple but powerful tool, kind of like a litmus test to cut through all the hype and the marketing noise. And this is it. This is the whole test. It all boils down to this one question. Does a project need to do anything on the main blockchain other than just managing UTXOs to support some other asset that isn't Bitcoin? And by the way, UTXO is just a fancy term for the unspent Bitcoin left over from a transaction. You can think of it like the digital change you get back when you buy something. So is a project doing more than just managing that digital change? If the answer is yes, then from this viewpoint, you've got a problem. All right, so let's put this test to work. We're going to apply it to 5 different projects out there in the wild and see how they actually stack up against this very specific standard. Okay, so take a look at this table. Now, the results might seem a little backward at first. According to this test, if the answer is no, the project actually passes. If the answer is yes, it fails. And you can see a really clear divide here. 2 projects get a pass, and 3 fail. Let's dig into why. First up, the 2 that pass. Square Bitcoin is a pretty simple case. It uses the Lightning Network, and on the main blockchain, its activity just looks like any other normal Bitcoin transaction. Now, Blockstream Liquid is a bit more complicated. It uses a fancy multi-signature setup. Think of it like needing several keys to open a digital safe. But the crucial thing here is that all the complex logic for other assets happens on a totally separate sidechain. It leaves the main Bitcoin layer alone. Now for our first yes, our first failure, according to the test. Lightspark fails because it has to perform all these special actions directly on the Bitcoin blockchain just to support its tokens. It literally has to announce new tokens on-chain, use special transactions to leave the system, and it even embeds extra data right into the mainnet transactions. This is way beyond just simple UTXO management. Alpenlabs also fails the test. The main reason is its ZK rollup, which is a way to bundle a ton of transactions together off-chain. But the source points out that this rollup then has to post these big chunks of data and proofs directly onto the mainnet. It's basically using Bitcoin's blockchain like a giant public hard drive, which is a pretty clear departure from just managing Bitcoin. And our last yes is for a potential upgrade, Blockstream's simplicity. Now, if this were ever added to Bitcoin, the source argues it would completely change the game for the base layer. We're talking about a whole new smart contract language that would run directly on-chain, and it would require every single node operator to learn a brand new set of rules just to validate these complex programs. So, what's the big deal? Why does any of this matter? Why is getting a yes on this test seen as so harmful? Well, let's move on and follow the money. This is where we get into the idea of malincentives. The number one driver, according to this source material, is simple: money. Lots of it. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital and angel investments pouring into projects that want to use Bitcoin's base layer for things that aren't Bitcoin. And all that money leads to what the source calls malincentives. It's this idea that huge financial backing creates a powerful pressure to change Bitcoin's fundamental rules. You see, these VC-backed companies have a really strong incentive to lobby for changes to the protocol that would make their stablecoins or tokens work better and cheaper, even if those changes conflict with Bitcoin's core mission of just being simple, sound money. And this pressure, the source claims, leads to real, tangible harm. It could make running your own full node way more expensive, which would price out hobbyists and smaller operators.
It could clog up the network with all this non-monetary data, driving up transaction fees for everyday people who just want to send some Bitcoin. And maybe most importantly, it could slowly chip away at the social agreement that Bitcoin's main job is to be money.
But, this isn't some black and white issue. This perspective isn't necessarily against recent upgrades like Taproot. The argument is more nuanced. It's that while Taproot is absolutely essential for great things like the Lightning Network, its power and expressiveness also kind of opened Pandora's box. It made it much easier and cheaper to embed the kind of non-monetary data that these other projects want to use. It's a real double-edged sword.
This brings us to a much more serious allegation from the source material, a potential conflict of interest. It points out that many of the same venture capitalists who are funding these new Layer 2 and stablecoin companies are also major financial backers of Bitcoin core development itself.
And to build on that point, the author claims that when people in the community have tried to limit the data carrying capacity of TapScript, those attempts have been consistently shot down by core developers. The viewpoint here is that this, along with relaxing other data limits, has effectively paved the way for these non-Bitcoin use cases.
So, given this whole diagnosis of the problem and its alleged causes, what's the solution? What does the source actually propose we do about it? Let's take a look at the specific call to action. The proposed way forward is pretty direct and has two main parts. First, reject the current Bitcoin Core software and its funding model, which this viewpoint sees as compromised. And second, for users to actively run alternative node software that's been specifically designed to prioritize Bitcoin's role as money above all else. And this all brings us to the fundamental debate at the heart of this entire discussion. You really have to ask, is Bitcoin a finished monetary protocol, something designed to do one thing perfectly and forever? Or is it more of an open platform, a foundation meant for all kinds of future innovation, even if that innovation supports assets that aren't Bitcoin? The answer to that question, well, that's probably going to shape the future of Bitcoin for decades to come.